Because you're magic people to me. You're magic people to me. Hold your head up high, let your voices fly. I'm proud to be Māori.
Tēnā tātou, nau mai hoki mai ki tēnei kaupapa, whakatō i te kākano, planting seeds. Got the brother in with us today to share some kōrero, but for everyone to get to know him in another way, I suppose. So brother Te Ao, nau mai bro.
Kia ora bro, kia ora, tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe bro. And before we get into it, cuz, just I'll give you some time to introduce yourself, and then we'll flow into some beautiful kōrero from there.
Well, my name is Te Aorere Pewhairangi, Ngāti Pro from Tokomaru Bay. East Coast, but I'm here living in Whakatane. It's quite funny, bro. We caught up at that brewery last year. Bro, we were we'll catch up. But it was the classic. I haven't seen you since then.
Exactly. And I actually remember the first ever time I met both you and Kimi, which was down at Wellington.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
You know, and we were down there for a wānanga. And I remember we were sitting in this porofita, and everyone was doing introductions, and you just gave this mana introduction. He moko puna tēnei o paikea. And I was just like, whoa, this fella. So, you know, there is, you know, some good stuff that I feel we're going to go into, bro. Just the man that you are and the things that you've been able to do. And people know you online, you know, on TV as a broadcaster, as a commentator now. So looking forward to getting into all of that. But when we go into looking at you, my bro, and what was it like growing up for you, being in Te Ao Māori, and how has that been such a pivotal part in your journey?
Well, I've said it a few times, but for those who probably don't know, my kōrero is that I grew up speaking Māori, only speaking Māori. My parents never spoke English to us growing up. And at kōhanga reo, kura and whare kura, we only ever spoke Māori. My mates, we only ever spoke Māori to each other. And I didn't start learning English formally until I was at high school. And people have probably seen my year 9 journal. You know. I was there learning to spell cat, mat, hat, all of that. So it was quite a unique upbringing, bro. Steeped in Te Ao Māori and tikanga Māori. But in saying that, you know, it didn't mean I didn't. It doesn't mean I didn't, you know, learn how to live in this world, a Pākehā dominated world. For example, you know, I was learning cat, mat, hat at age 13, but on my 19th birthday, I started as a subtitler at Māori TV. So, you know, writing, translating and writing in English the subtitles on a nationally broadcast television station. So, it was quite a unique upbringing. And I think what I encourage people to do is to teach only Māori to their kids.
Wow.
Because the rest of the world will teach them Pākehā. You know, you have to order a Big Mac in English. The radio, YouTube, everything around us is all in Te Reo Pākehā. And like, I'm no one special, bro. Like, you know, it took me 5 or 6 years to pick up English. And to, you know, be a subtitler and a translator, which was a lot easier because I was immersed in Te Ao Pākehā anywhere I went outside of my own house. So, fortunate enough to grow up with Te Reo Māori, but to now be not only bilingual but bicultural, so I can approach every situation from 2 lenses or 2, you know, knowledge bases, I guess.
And I think that's super important, bro, and like hugely great to build that confidence, you know, knowing that there are two sides or two worldviews that you know, well, to an extent, inside and out, right? But how has that helped you personally, bro, being able to sort of step in both worlds, and how has that influenced you into who you are now?
Can I share a story, bro?
Of course.
Kōrero, so just to preface this kōrero, what I, post on social media, you've probably heard the kōrero. My cousin Dane shared to me about Maui. He was raised by a council of tohunga, 5 tohunga, Te Kāhui Tū, Te Kāhui Pai, was the name of the council, and they taught him karakia and te tapu o tua whakarere is what it's called. But if you were to ask someone what Maui's, most common characteristic is, they'd probably say whakatoi, he's cheeky. So online, probably people know me as, a whakatoi person, or just a cheeky clown who's just, a bit of an idiot online. But I guess like my tipuna Maui, I'm either the biggest idiot you ever meet or the most serious hohonu tapu person. There's absolutely no in between. But what I think coming on to this podcast is that I wanted to show a bit of my more tapu side, or my deeper thinking side of it. So there won't be too many jokes, bro. But that. just to go back to your pātai about being bicultural. My mum growing up, she's Pākehā, she's full Pākehā, but she's taught Te Ao Māori for 30 years. She like writes the NCEA exams and all of that, yeah. And she's Catholic. My dad, he's ringatu. So at home we grew up, with Christian beliefs. But at school, for the first 17 years of my life, I was at Mana Tamariki. We'd recite 2 whakapapa in the morning and 1 in the afternoon. And these were in the form of waiata tawhito, mō te atea, waiata karaua, all of those things. And I think there were about 50 of them, and we'd just recite them every single day. And, as a kid, you kind of do things, unconsciously. But now that I've left school, I've kind of realised, man, this is quite deep. This is a nice little, repository of knowledge. Like, you ask me the whakapapa of any atua, I can recite them, because for the first 17 years of my life, that's what we did.
Wow.
So, at home we had, the biblical and all of those beliefs growing up. But at school we learnt, te taha, Te Ao Māori. And just to finally get to my point, this is the dichotomy between. I just want to talk about the dichotomy between the creation story from a biblical perspective and a Māori perspective. So in biblical terms, it would be Adam and Eve in the story of Genesis, King James. God created the world, me nei āhuatanga katoa. And then God gave dominion to man over all the fish in the sea, or the fowl in the air, or the cattle on the land, and every living thing. And if I was to look at that from a Māori perspective, we know the separation story of Rangi and Papa. And the atua, the tama atua, there were 70 of them. And they created the world. So looking at your posters from Haunui, there's Rongo, he begat, Rongo and Haumia, they begat all cultivated and uncultivated food. Tangaroa begat the fish, reptiles and everything that lives in the oceans and our waterways. Tāwhiri Mātea begat the winds, the clouds, everything that's weather around us. So our atua created the environment that we live in, and the younger sibling, Tāne, this is where I go back to, the whakapapa that we learned. He had 12 wives. Āpunga mumuhanga tū kapua hine Aorere ki rurutangi a Aorere noa punga tū toro whenua hine mahahuna tāwharanui tā wake toro. So 12 wives. That begat all the trees, the birds, the insects. Well, this is what I learnt growing up, but now that I've kind of reached other wānanga, there are other stories and other wives that beget different things. But in this kōrero, Tāne created, everything that's in the forest i maroto I ēnei aitanga through these marriages. But the last thing Tāne created was hine ahuone. And going back to the story of the 70 atua, each atua helped fashion te one I kurawaka to create or to form hine ahuone, and each atua gave a part of themselves to hine ahuone. So, there's Uru, who's one of the older siblings, gave the head, and you see in the Pacific, they either call the head the Uru or the Ulu, and that's Uru te ngangana. The ngangana is the I don't know the English word for it, but the anga of your head, and then there's roi or roake, which are your two roros. And then each part, your lungs was given by Tāwhiri Mātea, your veins by Tangaroa, your stomach and your emotions, where we hold our emotions, your muscles were given by Tū Matauenga. So each god gave a bit. Part of themselves, and Tāne, ka tihei ia, hine ahuone kia Māori o rai. But what it is that if you compare these two stories of the creation of man, God gave dominion to Adam and Eve, and they in the tuakana role. But if you look at the Māori relationship through hine ahuone and Tāne, hine ahuone's older siblings were the trees and the birds and all of her tuakana, and even her first cousins were all older siblings, because Tāne was a younger sibling, so the fish, and everything living in our waterways, and cultivated and uncultivated food through haumie and rongo. If you look at it from a Māori perspective, we're in the taina role. The taina role,
yeah. Wow.
So we're junior to the environment, so we must act in ways consistent with that of a taina. And I think, if I was to look at the worldview coming from the Western or the biblical worldview, is that I think that's where capitalism comes from, because you have seniority above the environment, so you can cut the trees down and sell them for profit. You can pillage all of the fish in the sea and sell it for profit, because you're given dominion over all of those things, and you're also given, free will to choose what's right and wrong. But in a Te Ao Māori perspective, you're not given that, because you're a taina and you must act in that way. And I think, just to give an example of how I view the world with two different lenses, and how I can approach every decision I make with two knowledge bases. It's not to discredit, my that taha, those teachings that I've been taught, but it helps me to make better informed decisions, that I am a part of our atua Māori. And I'm a part of the environment. I'm not bigger than it, so I can't, act in ways that are detrimental towards our environment, and all of those things.
And I really enjoy that whakaaro, bro. And what really comes through for me is just interconnectedness. How everything is interconnected in ways, and hearing these beautiful stories of te orokohanga, or the creation stories, and you having these two perspectives or worldviews, and not necessarily understanding them, but seeing the difference between them. And is there part of you, bro, that is acceptance of both, or like where do you stand? Like, do you have challenges or conflict or anything within that space?
Yeah, well, I guess I go back to what Kathy Jews says, and she said, raise your kids, teach them ngā kete o te wānanga, the free baskets of, I guess, knowledge or education or learning, and then once they've mastered those, send them out to the world to learn the infinite kete o te wānanga. So I guess, what's the word? Is it Socratic method of learning? That's not giving the answer to the student, but giving them every side of the argument so they can form their own answer.
Wow.
And make their own decisions. And I get my bro Tommy, Malcolm, he told me that kōrero, but I liken it to Wharehuia's method of teaching. And he'll never give you a straight yes or no answer. He'll answer your answer with another answer. And he'll, like you could say something profound that he probably agreed with, but he'd go to the counter argument anyway to, broaden your perspective. So you see all sides of the argument. And it's not to discredit. This kōrero is not to discredit the Bible. That's another kete o te wānanga. I think that's that can be useful. I think it's taught Te Ao Māori forgiveness. I like the story of Moses. Let my people go. That's pretty cool, and we can learn from those things. And I think sometimes we just have negative connotations
to it.
Because Chris Winitana, his son Herea told me this. He talked about the 3 Gs. This is to simplify colonization. The 3 Gs are you give germs to the grandfather, you give guns to the father, and then you give God to the son. And that's how you colonize a people. The germs will wipe out the kaumātua, where all our traditional knowledge is. The guns, that creates trauma and intergenerational trauma. And then you give God to to inculcate or indoctrinate them into a system that you believe in.
Damn, bro, that's profound. I haven't heard that kōrero before. And, since we're on that sort of like topic of, at that sort of like time, right, there was the Tohunga Suppression Act. And I've just been sort of like seeing some kōrero just sort of going around how these natural practices that, we're able to heal, we're able to sort of like transcend, we're able to sort of support. And this isn't just closing us off to here in Aotearoa, but just Indigenous people have so many methods of being able to support and heal people going through certain things. And so what are your whakaaro on these sort of like practices that are out there, whether it's karakia or all of these other things that the Pākehā or colonizers were most fearful of?
As you said, there was legislation put in place to, suppress or oppress, or to pretty much get rid of all our traditional knowledge, to make us, think like Pākehā, act like Pākehā, speak Pākehā, and all of those things. And I guess that's a part of colonization. What you do is you give people the tools so they can colonize themselves.
Wow.
But I think there's a lot of healing and learning and reclaiming your language and all of these things. And we're fortunate, bro, that people, during this Tohunga Suppression Act, went into hiding and held these kōrero and whareporukuruku. That's the wānanga of passing down intergenerational knowledge through father to son, or within the whare. It wasn't the whare wānanga, it's just the kōrero that was held and passed down, in the home. And we're lucky that people were, still practiced and still shared this knowledge. And, in the 70s, there was the big fight for language revitalization and all of that. And I think there's a lot of healing. Can I share another story
Course,
of
bro.
my own personal experience, bro? So in 2014 and 2019, I had 2 bad head injuries. The first one was playing rugby league, and I had to get like a scan on my brain and stuff, and I had bruising and swelling and bleeding in my brain. It took about 18 months of headaches.
Was it a tackle? Were
Yeah,
you in a tackle? Did you make the tackle? Or?
I got tackled just a head high, bro, and I got up. I had blurry vision for about 2 hours. How I explain the vision is like opening your eyes in the pool.
Oh.
So I woke up, I was like, oh, fuck, this isn't normal. And then our physio was like, if you start spewing up, go to the hospital. And sure enough, a couple hours later, I started spewing up. And that was kind of the start of my journey, you know, into, well, not journey, but through that, bro, I think there's like 8 or 9 symptoms of concussion, and I think I had like 7 of them.
Wow.
And 2 of them was depression and anxiety, and bro, just real bad, like waking up and being like, damn, I have to go to the toilet, but I'm too scared to get out of bed.
Oh.
Yeah. Like I said to you before, for the first 2 months, I laid in my bed with the curtains drawn, sunglasses on. I couldn't look at my phone. I couldn't watch TV. I couldn't listen to audio books. So I kind of was taken back to te kore and te pō, really. So I had to, sit
And
there.
what kind of whakaaro were you having in those times, bro? Like when you're saying depressed or anxiety, and knowing that you basically, although you needed an escape, you just couldn't. So what were you... Is there any ways you could explain some of the things
bro,
you were going through, bro?
I wouldn't wish concussion or this concussion on, bro, my worst enemy. It's easily the hardest thing I've been through in my life. And I think the biggest one was frustration, bro. And because it was a brain injury and a mental thing, you know, if it was a broken arm, I'd know that my arm was broken, and others would know my arm was broken and could see, and, you know, you can do things to heal it. But for a concussion, you can't do anything,
Unseen,
really.
eh?
Nah,
that's all you, eh? That's something that's within you that you need to sort of like work through.
Yeah, so like, frustrated, like wake up every morning, my vision's still blurry. I'm like, damn, you know, and 6 months gone by and your vision's still the same. And you're like, is this forever? You know, can I go like, because 2 of the symptoms is sensitivity to light and sensitivity to sound. So I couldn't leave the house and go to the supermarket because, you know, if you think about it, it's kind of like, for us going to the supermarket, it's pretty normal, but when you think about it, it's very busy. There's a lot to look at. There's a lot of different sounds, and it'll just trigger headaches. Like I couldn't do anything normal like that for ages.
And you had chronic fatigue at this time as well?
Yeah, bro. I'd sleep 12 to 15 hours every single night.
And wake up tired?
Yeah, wake up tired. I have a 2-hour nap in the afternoon. And I guess that's just my brain switching off to heal.
Yeah.
And but just to go back to the pātai you asked ages ago, I found solace and healing in reconnecting with Te Ao Māori, pūrakau Māori. One of the kōrero that I really connected with was the kōrero of tāne and whiro. And since then I've heard other tohunga speak about it, like Uncle Mark Kōpue does awesome stuff with Mahi Atua, and I've read books on it. They, like people who attended Te Rāwhioro, which is the wharewana, they wrote about these stories. And basically the kōrero is tāne, or they wanted to go and get ngākete o te wānanga, and they resided in te tiki o Rangi, or the top knot of Rangi, where Rehua, the eldest sibling, lived. So they had a wānanga on earth, and they're like, ko ai ka piki ngā rangi ngahuru maru ki tiki mai ngā kete o te wānanga. And they decided that tāne would climb and get, the baskets of knowledge. But this is where his older brother, Whiro, he became jealous and he thought he should be the person to climb. And during Tāne's ascent to retrieve ngā kete o te wānanga, Whiro made it as difficult as possible for him. And for me, this is how I connect to any journey that we take. There are external forces that are negative and even internal forces that are negative. He sent everything that creeps and crawls and scares you on Tāne's path. But what he also did was he did a mākutu to Tāne, and a part of this mākutu is taihiti taiwawa. Taihiti being it's the most difficult thing you'll ever do, and taiwawa it's impossible, you can't achieve it.
Wow.
And with this mākutu on Tāne's path, he had all these external challenges, but he also had the internal battle of taihiti taiwawa, his own mental telling him it's extremely difficult, it's impossible, you can't achieve it. And Tāne, I guess the story of ngā kete o te wānanga, for me, it talks about, consciousness and the power of the mind and, learning and all of that. And I think Tāne and Whiro still live in our mind, and there's a constant battle there. I read a book called Think Like a Monk. Have you read that book?
I haven't, but I know of the one.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool book, bro. And one of the teachings was a Cherokee person. I like indigenous stories. Cherokee kaumātua speaking to his mokopuna, and he said, boy, there are two wolves in your mind. One's positive and one's negative. The positive is love, forgiveness, giving, all the positive things in our world. And the negative, greed, hate, fear, all of those things. And they're two wolves, and they're constantly at battle in your mind. And none will ever defeat the other. And the boy asks, who wins? How does one, beat the other? And then that's what the boy asks, who wins? And the kaumātua said to him, the one you feed.
Ooh.
And I guess that's the story of Whiro and Tāne as well. Tāne being, Tāne te wānanga being knowledge and growth and prosperity and all of that, and Whiro being fear and anxiety and depression and all of those things. And like I said before, our atua live within us, and I guess they have dominion over our minds, Tāne and Whiro. And I think I try to hold Tāne in my mind all the time, but sometimes Whiro comes knocking at the door, bro. And you have to acknowledge that it'll always be there. We'll always have these challenges in life, but never invite Whiro in to stay and don't feed him.
And you've had enough of Whiro going through that whole period as well. Yeah. Like, you almost got comfortable, right, with that atua within you. Yeah.
And I guess, when you go to those dark places and you become accustomed to that, it's easy to be stuck in that place. But I know now that, when Whiro comes into my mind, those negative thoughts of taihiti taiwawa, you acknowledge that he's there, you don't invite him in, and you just let him pass on. And, and that's in a hohonu sense of depression and anxiety, but I like to, I think of taihiti and taiwawa when I'm running. Very probably see that I do long distance running, and taihiti and taiwawa creeps into my mind. And I've created a whakatauaki from it. Taihiti taiwawa, it's impossible. You think, you just give up, your legs are heavy, all of that. Taihiti taiwawa, tai whakaiatia. Internally you'd say, it's too difficult, it's impossible. And sometimes externally people will say, nah, it's too difficult and it's impossible. But tai whakaiatia, go and achieve it anyway.
Wow.
So I guess, through our pūrakau, we can learn about, the relationships between us and our atua and us and ourselves, self-awareness, all of that.
Yep.
Kōrero. And I guess that through going into our old pūrakau, that's what, brought me healing and why I'm stronger now, because I understand, not through just the stories, but through the experiences that
Going
I've been
through it,
through. Yeah, I've actually put the pūrakau to the test.
And I guess that's probably why you enjoy stories and why you enjoy expressing stories, because of how much impact they've had on your own experience. And I really enjoy hearing stories because it broadens your sort of awareness, and you start to internalize things a little bit differently, and you start to find within these stories moments of relatability. And in a story, there's always a start, there's always this body, and then you're always finished with this lesson. And I think for you, just having this profound experience, but also now having the gift to be able to share your own story by influencing even more stories, bro, it's sort of like a beautiful space that you're in. And, when you're thinking about going through all of that, bro, and moving into the type of things that you're doing now, how do you translate that in a way that's relatable or digestible for people who may be going through something similar or who just need that outlet?
That's that's a good question, bro. And before I answer your question, I agree with you that our pūrakau, they have lessons in them. Pākehā hear the stories and they quick to discredit and say, it's a myth. They look at the fallacies within the stories, but we look at the truths and the lessons and the principles and the values. For example, the Maui story, and I credit this kōrero, Rāwhitiroa, he shared it with me. The Maui story of Maui and the sun. Maui apparently, Pākehā would say, he slowed down the sun, he lassoed the sun. But what Maui was he was an inventor. So he invented the hinaki, he invented the taruke, which is the crayfish pot, the kupenga, the net. He invented the tara, or the kāniwhaniwha of a spear. So back in Hawaii, their spears were only flat, so when you whittle the manu, sometimes you'd get them, but they'd fly away because there was no barb to hold them. And it's the same with a fish hook. Yeah, there was a barb in there to, once you get the fish, it's hooked. And Maui invented all of these things. And it's not so much that he went and lassoed the sun and slowed down the sun to have more time. What he did, he was an inventor to be more efficient with, the day-to-day things that you have to do, so you have more time in your day. So these are the lessons that, we have to be inventive, we have to be we have to try new things, we have to move forward, so we do create more time in our day-to-day for things that we really value, time with whānau.
Bro, something just come up for me, if you were to ever sort of have the opportunity to sort of like meet Maui, what would something come up for you? Like, what would there be a question, or like what would come up for you, bro? Because he's had a significant impact on your life, this atua, this tipuna. Like, what would be something that comes up for you?
I wasn't going to share
on the TikTok.
Well, that's what my PhD is in, eh?
Yeah.
It's what I'm doing in my PhD is looking at the life of Maui. So my great-grandfather's grandfather's name was Pewhairangi, and he was one of the last students of a whare wānanga of Te Rāwhioro. And he, this was in the 1800s, and this is, just a little bit after colonization began, and, you know, a little bit before the Tohunga Suppression Act that you mentioned. And what he did was they closed down the whare wānanga, and he wrote down everything that he knew. There were 29 books or manuscripts that he wrote, and this is how extensive the kōrero is. There's one book that just has whakapapa. It's whakapapa ure tārewa and whakapapa tararere, just lines of whakapapa. And I've counted the names in there. There's about 17,450 in just this one book. Wow. And this is just oral tradition that was given māngai ki te māngai. And he wrote the life story of Maui from beginning to end. And there's 13 stories within. So the first story is the birth, Maui Tikitiki a Taranga, being wrapped in the tikitiki of his mother, and cast to sea, and then went back and then into the cave of Muriranga Whenua, and all the things that he did. It talks about all the things that he invented. It talks about meeting his brothers. It talks about meeting his mum, meeting his dad, the sun, the fish, all of that, right up until Hinenui Te Pō, his death. And that's what my PhD is on. I want to write a book on Maui's life story from beginning to end, and all the lessons, kind of like the one that I just shared with you, all of the lessons within it. But if I was to ask him a story, a question, I'm not too sure.
Not too sure.
I already have 1 million going through this PhD that I'm like, what does this mean? But no, that's my
incredible. That's going to be an incredible sort of space that, you know, you're just going to. I just think that's inspirational, bro. Being able to go through all the things that you've gone through to get all of this mātauranga and to be placing it into this one space that could be so beneficial for so many people. And the thing that really comes up for me, bro, as you've been talking and sharing, is just how much of a great learner you are. You know, like there's so many people out there who, well, I wouldn't say so many, but it's rare to be amongst people who learn something but hold it. You know what I mean? Who can just hold this knowledge. And, you know, talking about your tipuna, who was able to recite all of this beautiful mātauranga just by all of the whakaaro that he has. And so for you, bro, are you aware of your gift to be able to just hold mātauranga?
It's funny you asked that, because that was something that I learned. I didn't know, but through my concussion, I had to go to the, after my first concussion in 2014, this was maybe like a month after the initial hit, I had to go to see a neurologist in Green Lane. I was training at Shane Cameron's gym at the time.
Right.
And he was like, I'll go to this is my concussion specialist. So I went, and keeping in mind this is like fully just sick, bro. Like my parents had to take me, drag me out of bed and take me and do this 3-hour test. And what it is, they test you for 3 hours, all these different I guess, like, I'm not too sure, like
different
cognitive, memory, all of that, comprehension, all of those things, and they test your brain, and then you have to go back a year later to see how much you've progressed. Right. See, that's how they kind of measure how you're healing. And the fella, the neurologist, he did all the memory tests on me, so I had to draw these pictures, and he'd say four forms of transportation, 4 foods, 4 pieces of furniture, and 4 of something else. And I had to say it back to him. He'd say, "Is like, just tell me how many things you remember." And I said it back, and he was like, "All right, can you say it back to me in the order that I said it to you?" And I said it back to him. And he was like, "Can you say it to me backwards from the order there?" And I said it back to him. Wow. And he told my mum, he was like, he has a photographic memory.
Wow.
Yeah, and that was pretty cool. I didn't know.
Figure
bro.
that. Yeah, true.
And I guess that's where it comes from. It's in my whakapapa that they learnt whakapapa and they had to retain it. And what Pau Te Mara says, ko te utu o te hapa I te whakapapa ko te mate. So back then it was so important to be right, because knowledge was transmitted orally, and you couldn't make a mistake, because you mess up the line for forever. And yeah, so I was like, oh, okay. And he asked my mum, like, has he been, because it's partly genetic, but you also have to be trained, to have a photographic memory. And that's when I go back to learning whakapapa for 2 in the morning, reciting 2 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon for the first 17 years of my life.
Wow.
And I know, bro, like, if you tell me something, if you give me a new word or a new whakatauki or a new pūrakau, I can remember everything you say to me. Yeah.
And I need to say it once.
Yeah, you don't need to say it once. But my partner, she'll tell me to hang up the washing and I'll forget.
So it's a line to what you're interested in.
I think it's a selective.
Selective memory. And like both the like even just following on from that thread, going, because growing up, I've heard kōrero, you just wanted to be, an athlete, playing rugby league. Then you've obviously had this concussion, and then you found your way back through Te Ao Māori and pūrakau. And how has that been like? Whoa, this is like, has it been like pretty, wouldn't say freaky, but have you come to the space in your journey where you've been like, man, all of this was meant to happen?
Yeah. So I think it's all happened for a reason. Things are too like
in sync.
Yeah, in sync, that it's kind of been it's supposed to happen this way. And I guess
and have you found that what I want to say is, have you found whether your toe, or have you just fully accepted, like, man, this is where I'm meant to be?
Yeah. I have now. Like, back then it was a week after my 19th birthday, so in July the 19th of July that it happened. I had to call my brother, and the year before I was contracted to the Parramatta Eels. I was young, 17, 18, thinking, I'm gonna play in the NRL, because my older brother, who was playing in the NRL at the time, and he sent me home. He was like, go back home. I was playing Prems for Point Chev. He was like, play for them for a year, then come back and give under 20s another crack, and give the NRL dream another crack. But while I was at Point Chev, halfway through that season, that's when I got my head knock, and I had to ring my brother, because I did the first test with the neurologist, then I went back a year later, and he said, nah, it's the next head knock, because it was so severe. The next head knock, you either be in a wheelchair or in the ground, so you can't play contact sport ever again. And that was tough, bro. That was a tough pill. I had to ring my brother and say, I can't come back over. Like, I can't even play league. And it's not to say, like, I don't want people to get the impression that I'm saying I would have played in the NRL, but the tough pill to swallow was
that's where a lot of your focus and drive was for that period.
And the biggest pill was just not even get to play a game of rugby league ever again. Whereas that was back then, I thought, that this is it. It's the greatest thing ever. If I was to play in the NRL, seeing my brother and the lifestyle that he was living and all of that, but it was cut short for me. And I had to turn to Te Ao Māori, and if I think about it, it's where I found healing, and I guess the head knock was just to put me back on this path. Yeah, and I guess that's where I'm at now. It's time to finish my PhD and start sharing these stories and helping others. I'm not saying I'm a mental health specialist. I haven't studied anything formally, but what I try to share is my own personal experiences, and I guess that's where ako and wheako differ. Ako is learning from the knowledge or experiences of others, and wheako is just learning through your own experiences.
Wow.
And I think we have to take a bit of both. You know, we have to read books, bro. They're the cheat codes.
They're the cheat codes, bro.
You said about learning earlier, bro. I love books, bro. And one thing, a profound kōrero there, was like, I should have done this ages ago, was Matai Kepa. He said to me, bro, we're oral people. We learnt māngai ki te māngai. I was like, oh, that's right. That's so true. So I not only read books, but I also listen to audio books. And I'd listen to a book and I could just remember everything and remember what I think is relevant to my life. For you
and where you're at this point in time, eh?
Yeah.
And that's, you know, before we start wrapping it up, I got two pātai that I do want to sort of like finish off with. And one of them is, you know, I want to go back to that kōrero about how back in the rās, everything sort of had to be right because that's how everything was documented. And now when we're just in this era of just information overload, how do you sort of like figure out like what is the truth or those kinds of things? And, you know, what's your take on that if you have any whakaaro? Because there's so many things around at the moment, right? Like, knowledge is just at our fingertips, information is here, there's all of these different kōrero. So for you, you know, like how do you sort of like look into these things?
Yeah, I guess I go back to the Socratic method of learning. Have, you know, multiple puna mātauranga or resources that you look to and kind of come up with your own understanding of what it means. There's that kōrero. Second time I've mentioned my cousin Dane Hollis. He talked to me, Derek Lardell, he talked to him about the pattern of kape, bro. And I'm writing it here. So it goes something like that. Looks like that. I don't know if you fellas can see it. Maybe you could edit it in later. And what it is with the kape is that it talks about each generation of whakapapa. So you said te orokohanga, that's the first, you know, kapenga o te wā. And what kape are is their repositories of knowledge or deposits of knowledge. So there's te orokohanga, then ngā kōreroanga, ngā tipua, tamati wākashi, these the different timelines of our deposits of knowledge. Ngā tipuna Hawaiki, and then te hoe nukuroa, which is our migration stories, and then I guess Aotearoa, and these are the 5 different kapenga o te wā, or deposits of knowledge that we can draw from.
Wow.
And there's the kōrero of kawa and tikanga. So I think kawa is are the kōrero and the values and the principles and the lessons that are taught within these kapenga o te wā. And those are unchanging. Kawa doesn't change. But what we have to do is we have to go back to these deposits of knowledge, learn from them to inform our tikanga, because what we're doing, our practices, what we're doing now is different to what our ancestors, our tipuna did 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 500 years ago, because the environment we live in is different. You know, it's technological age. You know, we're having a wānanga with cameras and microphones, whereas they sat, you know, within a whare. So I think you have to go back to all our pūrakau, because that's what those are our kawa. That's what holds our knowledge, our values, our principles. And once you learn all of those things, you can enact it through our tikanga and live in alignment with our kawa. And then within our world and what we're doing right now is we have to create our own kapenga o te wā. And we take all these repositories of knowledge, we take what's relevant to our world and we put it into our kape, so the next generation can come back and look at what we did and to inform their practices and how they so I guess if I go back to that kōrero, if you want to a new idea, read an old book, or if you want a new idea, go back to our pūrakau. And that'll inform our practices, and that's how you can stay consistent with your values in this information world. There's so much knowledge out there.
Bro.
There's a lot of bullshit as well. And you have to be aware of unearned wisdom, eh?
I love even just that, bro. Unearned wisdom. That's why it's just important to speak to experience, eh? Like something that you've personally gone through, and then finding the mātauranga that's relatable to that. That's what gives you the stilts or the stability to be able to share your whakaaro through. And, you know, the last whakaaro that I do want to sort of like get from you, bro, is, you know, like, there's a main sort of crew, your Aorere whānau, you know, where you do your touch, and, you know, you fellas got a good crew going on. And how's that for you, bro? You know, like, obviously you can't play league anymore, but you've got this other aspect that scratches that itch for you. And, you know, like, how was that for you, brother? Like, you know, you are hohonu, but there's these other things that you just like to do for fun and for those kinds of things. So, you know, what is this whānau Aorere to you, brother?
Yeah, bro. Well, that's my advice. That's, you know, I couldn't play rugby league anymore. I couldn't play contact sports. So I was like, all right, I'll just play touch. And so, yeah, and that kind of scratches that itch, and like it's an awesome kaupapa, bro. My whāngai brother, Chase Ngawati, passed away. Him, along with a couple others, Paul Davis, Mitz Graham, Whitioa Black, they created it, the team, and, you know, they were just young boys back then, but what it is, kind of like how you said, you know, we learn through our experiences over the last 10, 11, 12 years. They've kind of learnt through the experiences, and now the team has values that we live by. And I think it's cool in that sense that, you know, it's a kaupapa Māori that's relevant to 2021. You know, our tipuna didn't play touch, and I'm big on the kōrero. One of my bros, Here Ao Winitana, said, ki te hōhonu rawa tōruku ki te mātauranga. Ka whakaao maramatia o tō hine ngaro, engari ka pirau tō kiko. If you dive too deep into mātauranga Māori, well, there are three things in Te Ao Māori that make you wairangi. It's whakapapa, whakapono, and whakapōauau. Whakapapa being, you know, our pūrakau, our genealogies, all of those things. Whakapono, religion, and whakapōauau, trauma and drugs. Abuse. Yeah. Abuse, yeah, all of those things. And I live in that space quite often, bro, you know, with my PhD and all of that, but this is a putanga for me. You know, all of that, ka whakaao maramatia tō hine ngaro, you become enlightened and you go to these deep places, but you lose touch with reality. So I guess the Aorere team, bro, is my connection to this world, bro. Yeah, it keeps me grounded, and it keeps me in an environment, you know, with I shouldn't say normal people, but, you know, with you know,
just the brothers,
the normal world,
and the
the brothers. And that's also why I do social media as well, bro. So it draws me back to, you know, being normal, being in the world that everyone else is
existing in. And I think, you know, just the energy that comes with the whole touch scene though, like, man, there's so much like hectic energy, and even just there's someone who watches, you know, just it's just so fast paced, you know, there's just everyone G'ing each other up, like you got to have confidence, like all of those kinds of things they experience within that space of touch. It's exciting. So I'm glad that you just shared some whakaaro there, bro. And to be honest, brother, I could honestly talk with you. I just enjoy listening, hearing like where your whakaaro go. And but you know, just to finish us off, bro, and I'm sure we'll be able to run it back at some point, knowing that we do live in Whakatane, and hopefully we can catch up more often.
I'll see you in 2023, bro.
But brother, if there was any sort of like final kōrero that you do want to share for those who may be listening, I just want to give it over to you, bro, just to whakakapi us.
I guess tai hiti, tai wawa, tai whakaiatia. You know, you face struggles in your journeys, external and internal. People will say, you know, it's too difficult, it's impossible, but go and achieve it anyway. And another thing with Wiki o Te Reo Māori coming up, I've created this other whakatauaki that says, ko te ara tere ki angitu, ko te ara mātau, ko te ara tika ki angitu, ko te ara mahana. The quick way to success. If you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. So, you know, in whatever journey you take, hopefully it's in Te Reo Māori and reclaiming tikanga Māori and all of those things and decolonising yourself. Don't go alone. Take your whānau with you. Take your friends with you. Because, you know, there are more benefits in once you get to that place of success or angitu, you'll be mahana, you'll be warm and surrounded by the people you love.
Wow, bro. Profound, man. Profound. So, brother, thank you so much for coming through and to the whānau. Thank you for tuning in. Hope you've received some beautiful kōrero from this. And if there are any parts, you know, just reach out to the bro Te Ao. Let him know some of the kōrero that has come through for you. And we'll definitely see you in the next episode. And my brother, tēnā koe, bro.
Kia ora, tēnā koe, tēnā tātou.
Beautiful.